As DeMar DeRozan and Coby White continue to lead the league in minutes played, we're going to talk a little bit about how their efficiency has been affected by that and why kind of the fact that we have two of the biggest workhorses in the NBA until they're only the ninth seed should really tell the front office how much they need to build out the depth on this team. We're also going to take a standings check on the Chicago Bulls in that Eastern Conference and preview the game tonight against the Sacramento Kings. We're getting into all that plus a little bit of the mailbag right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. My name is Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today. And so, DeMar DeRozan and Coby White are leading the league in minutes. I think we all know at this point, DeMar DeRozan is averaging 37.8 minutes per game. That does lead the NBA as far as minutes per game. But then when you look at it in total minutes played, Coby White actually leads the NBA at 2,193 minutes played so far. And he is only second. DeMar DeRozan is only second behind Coby White in that. And for his credit, DeMar DeRozan is averaging the second most minutes of his career, which he's only come close to that or played more than that at 38.2 minutes per game in the 2013-14 season with the Toronto Raptors. It has been a decade since DeMar DeRozan has averaged this type of minutes. And for his credit, DeMar DeRozan is still being an impactful player for the Chicago Bulls and still being extremely consistent. Now, we did have the recent game where he wasn't as consistent, and maybe that was him, the minutes and things finally catching up to him. But for his credit, DeMar DeRozan is averaging 22.7 points per game, good enough for 22nd highest in the NBA. He's also averaging 4 rebounds, 5 assists, and doing that on 46% shooting from the field. Now, the thing that kind of makes this all special is that we know that DeMar DeRozan was going to try to change his game a little bit, right, to kind of fit the new style that the Chicago Bulls wanted to play. And he's taken 2.8 three-pointers per game, the second most of his career, and hitting that at a 33.5% clip from three-point range. And that is the third best mark in his career. And, while DeMar DeRozan, Vooch, Zach LaVine all started this season off shooting career lows and true shooting percentages across the board, DeMar DeRozan has really worked himself out of that, whereas Zach LaVine is out for the rest of the season, and Nikola Vucevic is, as we talked about on yesterday's episode, having a historically bad shooting season that he's had. But for his credit, DeMar DeRozan's usage rate is considerably down this season. When you look at it, his first season in Chicago, he had a usage rate of 30.7. Last year, he had a usage rate of 27.4. This year, he's at 25.1 usage rate, which means that, hey, while we're still going to DeMar a lot, the usage rate has definitely come down some form. And, you want to, with the growth of Coby White and things like that, you definitely want to see that, rise up. And DeMar's no longer averaging career worst true shooting percentage. He is averaging the worst true shooting percentage since being a member of the Chicago Bulls at 57.2, down from over 59% the previous 2 seasons. But DeMar DeRozan is still being impactful, even with the minutes played. And to his credit, DeMar DeRozan says this: I love it. I love the game, and as a kid, when you're young, you play until your mama scream at you and those street lights come on. Same thing here. You love it. You try to relish in these opportunities. Now, again, got to give credit for DeMar DeRozan for what he's able to do at his age, still being able to be a productive player, and really, in a lot of times where the Bulls just can't buy a bucket, the 34-year-old DeMar DeRozan is the one that gets the bucket, gets to the free throw line, and helps the Chicago Bulls in that moment. Now, the biggest question around this has always been, if it takes a 34-year-old player that's getting paid over $20 million a year to get you to just being the 9th seed, do you have to change some things, right? And we know this team, not by either Coby or DeMar DeRozan, because we're going to talk about Coby here in a second as well. It's not at their fault that Zach LaVine went down with an injury. Torrey Craig's, missed now almost 30 games so far this season. It's not their fault for that, right? Alonzo Ball was never ready to go. That Vooch has missed some games. AC has missed some games, not nearly as much as what he missed before, right? But that those things have happened. It's not their fault. Javon Carter has been a bust for the Chicago Bulls. Coby White and DeMar DeRozan didn't affect that signing, right? And so, they aren't supported by some of the players that we hoped that they were going to be supported by, where those minutes could maybe come down, and even maybe DeMar wouldn't have to carry such a big workload that he still does on the Chicago Bulls. but it leads this front office to having to ask the question. And I think when you see the reluctance from the front office apparently to meet what DeMar DeRozan's asking price has been up until this point, hopefully that means the front office is also reviewing, hey, if we're going to keep DeMar here and pay him what he's asking, are we going to be able to do enough? Are we going to get enough production around him to where we can be as successful as we want to be? Now, there's another player in that we mentioned a little bit, Coby White, leading the league in minutes, period. Over the last 15 games, Coby White has averaged 39.8 minutes per game. He's still scoring 21 points per game over that stretch and 6.1 assists, but his efficiency has come down. 41.9% from the field, 33% from three-point range, and that's since January 25th has that happened for Coby White, and we feel it, right? And it's led a lot of Bulls fans to say, hey, this thing that we saw from Coby is great, but we need to make sure he has some support. Even, some people, I see you guys in the comment section saying, we have to keep Zach, we have to keep DeMar. Coby needs that support, he needs this and that. And listen, to some credit that is true, right? Like, Coby's clearly not a number one option. He's had a great season, and I do not want to mistake that the highest usage rate, the highest efficiency, the highest true shooting percentage, like Coby White is killing it right now. And yes, he's on a slump, and that slump is noticeable, but even with this slump, still averaging over 19 points per game. He's doing that on the season, 44.9% shooting from the field, the highest of his career, right? By a little margin. He shot 44.3% last season, but the volume was down. He only took 8 shots last season. He's almost doubled that this season, taking 15.2 shots per game. And then the three-point. He's taken the most three-pointers in his NBA career at 7.3, hitting that at a 38% clip, averaging 5 assists, averaging 5 rebounds per game, averaging right under a steal per game as well. Coby White is playing extremely well, and we know that Coby, even though he won't say it, and I gotta love him and respect him for it, because he won't take the easy out and excuse of saying it's exhaustion or anything like that. He's killing it. 57.7 true shooting percentage, the highest again of his career. The usage rate, second highest of his career. He had a higher usage rate his rookie year, but other than that, the highest at 23.2. He's done that at. So he's really, really playing a really good game right now. But you got to ask the question, and the thing that this front office has to look at the most is ask yourself: you have 2 players that are leading the league in minutes, that are giving you every bit of what they have energy-wise, day in and day out, and you're still at the 9th seed. Yes, you have injuries. Patrick Williams, I also didn't mention him, with injuries out for the rest of the season. You have tons of injuries. You have an unbalanced roster. You have those things. But it needs to, when AK comes out and he talks about things like competitive, right? You are literally running some of your players into the ground. And while they're responding great to it, like, I said it before, there was that article that came out that more minutes actually don't equal more injuries. So I've kind of stepped away from talking about, minutes in an injury perspective, but you can clearly see, especially in his first year being this volume of a shooter for Coby White, that he's starting to he's hit that wall. And it's there, and it's noticeable for this team. And so for, and also a head coach, I got to call out Billy Donovan in this as well, that does not go to the young players on his bench, the young, fresh legs that we do have on this team that haven't played a whole hell of a lot of minutes, the Dalen Terrys, the Julian Phillips, the Ernalot teams, right? That even if you want to throw in the Henry Drells, the Dama Sanogo, even though I tell you guys all the time, he's not going to play those 2 players. But even if you do want to add in those 2 players into this conversation, the fact is that Billy Donovan doesn't go to those guys a lot. He doesn't go to those guys consistently. And one could say, hey, how many games are the Bulls going to win if they do go to those guys a lot? I personally look at it and say, well, you want to build those guys up. Those are guys that you're going to have to rely on and that you need to try to develop. But again, people have 2 different mindsets on that, and that's perfectly fine. But what Coby and DeMar have given the Bulls, I don't want to belittle, I don't want to take away, because it's been great. They have 2 players doing that. But those 2 players have led the league in minutes, and we're fighting for the 9th seed. The 9th seed in the Eastern Conference, right? And so, not to take away from what those guys are doing, but it really puts, to me, a more of a highlight on the front office and what the front office needs to do to better support the players that you were before, running your players into the ground and make better decisions. Torrey Craig was a hit as far as in free agency. Now, he hasn't been able to stay on the court, so one could say that could turn into a miss. Absolutely. Javon Carter has given the Bulls a net nothing. Andre Drummond, a free agent signing from last year, been everything that we could ever want him to be. Billy Donovan, again, another player that Billy Donovan doesn't typically play a lot of minutes when he could play some more, especially while Nikola Vucevic is having a bad season. But it's the balance of the roster. And I think what this needs to show this front office is that you have to find a better way to balance out this roster. We need depth. And some basketball fans will tell you things like, well, role players, we need a bunch of top 10 players. And while that does absolutely help, right, that would completely change the outlook of the Bulls. Most basketball fans that watch the NBA day in and day out will tell you a lot of times it's the depth. It is the role players that create that separation and make the difference between a lot of teams where there has been more parity around the NBA. And we've seen it. How many games have the Chicago Bulls, has it been not the stars? Now, of course, we have those games where it has been the Donovan Mitchells, the Giannis Antetokounmpos, right, that absolutely killed the Chicago Bulls. But how many games has it been the Max Struses that have absolutely killed the Bulls, right? The Forkman Korkmaz back when he was on the Philadelphia 76ers that have killed the Chicago Bulls, right? It's been a lot of games also where role players have, and the Bulls need to get that depth, right? And some of that depth could come from the young players that you've drafted over the last couple of years, but you haven't done a good job up until this season developing. So it's just a change of mindset that I think this team needs to have heading into this offseason, but we still got a lot of season to play, right? And with that said, we're going to get into our standings watch, which I told you guys is going to be coming around this time of year. We like to do that and watch where the Bulls are right now. Thanks to the Atlanta Hawks, missing Trae Young, having a lot of losses themselves. Them and the Bulls have typically lost the same amount of games. The Bulls still have their 2-game advantage over the Atlanta Hawks for the 9th seed in the Eastern Conference. And right now, the Bulls have over a 70% chance to stay at the 9th seed and make it into postseason play in the play-in tournament. Again, I kind of hesitate to call that actual postseason because it's, again, the play-in tournament. Those stats aren't even tracked, which is still weirdly enough. And the Bulls are heading now towards a tough 4-game West Conference trip that it's not going to get easy. It's Sacramento tonight, right? Then we got the Jazz, the Warriors, and the Clippers. I already talked about it. Our opponents this week have a 55% winning percentage that we're facing over this week. But then it doesn't get easier over that. Coming out of this week, even after this week, going into next week, we have 3 games next week against the Mavericks, the Pacers, and the Clippers. Again, a tough schedule. And, it's very possible, let me be clear, that the Bulls go 0-7 over that stretch. It's not outside the realm of possibility. But like I've said, I want to see the Bulls maintain at least a 500 pace over that time. We got to start it with this week. But between now and March 14th, the Chicago Bulls have the second hardest schedule in the league. And that's why I kind of wanted to talk about. I know Tankathon has the Bulls having the 22nd easiest schedule between now and the end of the season. But this stretch right now to the middle of this month is a difficult stretch. And this could be the stretch that if the Bulls can stay ahead of this a little bit, that really can help solidify and create more separation while the Atlanta Hawks, who have an easier schedule over this week, I think they have the 5th easiest schedule or the 5th hardest schedule. I'm sorry. They have the 5th hardest schedule. They're going to be missing Trae Young over that time. We got to take advantage of this and win some basketball games. We just have to. And so if the Bulls are going to take advantage of that, if they're going to, they have to stay ahead of the pace and they're going to have to play tough against these tougher teams on their schedule. And so, listen, we'll see, man. The Hawks have the 5th hardest schedule remaining over the last 23 games of the season. Like I said, the Bulls are rated at having the 22nd easiest. But outside of that, we have the 2nd easiest schedule between now and the middle of March. So that's another thing you got to look at. So we're going to see what happens with this Bulls team, man. I have faith in this team for sure, right? I know what this team can be because we've seen it. We've seen them unlock that edge and what they can be. The bigger question is sometimes with the Bulls is that will that team show up day in and day out? And they don't always show up in that manner. Let's hope that they can, right? And it starts tonight against the Sacramento Kings. And we've talked about this team before. This is a team that has the 8th best offense in the NBA. Now, they average 118 points per game. They also take the 4th most 3-point attempts per game. They take 39 and a half, basically, 3-point attempts per game, and they hit that at the 12th best clip, the 12th best percentage in the NBA at 3-point at 37.1. Those are all areas that we know the Chicago Bulls struggle at. We allow role players to go off on us from 3-point range. We're going to have to be locked in this game to help avoid the Sacramento Kings' potent offense. We'll talk about their defense here in a second, where their defense leaves a lot of hope for the Chicago Bulls to be able to take advantage of some of the things that the Sacramento Kings lack at defensively. But when it comes down to it, the same thing that I said before, this Sacramento team spreads the ball around. They have 6 players that average double-digit points per game. They only have 1 20-point per game scorer. Well, basically 2. They got De'Aaron Fox at 26.9, so basically 27 points per game, and Domantas Sabonis at 19.9 points per game. Again, basically 20 points per game. And then Malik Monk averaging 15. Harrison Barnes averaging 15. Kevin Huerter averaging 10 points per game. Keegan Murray averaging 15 points per game. Harrison Barnes averaging 12. This is a team that spreads the ball around. They also average a lot of assists in this. They are 6th most in assists per game, so they spread the ball around a lot. Now, thing that the Bulls can take advantage of, they're a middle-of-the-pack rebounding team. They average 43.2 rebounds per game, which puts them at about 16th in rebounds per game, so the Bulls can take advantage of that. But offensively, this team needs to disrupt, close out on that three-point line because they're going to get it and play that tough, solid defense. Stay in the face of the Sacramento Kings, because if you allow a little bit of separation, they can go off from three on you, and then that game ain't getting back in hand. We've seen it happen with us before. We know that they're going to be looking to light the beam, so watch out for that when it comes to the Sacramento Kings on the offensive side of the ball. Now, where the Bulls can take advantage of them is on the defensive side of the ball. They're 22nd in the league in defense. They allow 117.9 points per game. Keep in mind, they average 118 points per game, so they almost average giving up as many points as they score per game. Now, of course, they still have a better differential. They still have won a lot of games, right? They've won 35 games on the season, so they're well above 500. But if the Bulls are going to take advantage of anything with the Kings, it's definitely going to be that defensive side of the ball where the Kings can. As a matter of fact, out of all the playoff teams, and that's the top 6, I'm not looking at teams that are going to be in the play-in tournament, the Sacramento Kings have the worst point differential in the Western Conference of playoff teams. And even when you go out to the top 8 teams, which will historically be the playoff teams, they still have the worst point differential in the Western Conference. So the Bulls can't take advantage of them defensively. We have to spread the ball around ourselves, and we have to take the efficient shots. We can't get into these lulls where we just go through scoring droughts, big time, 4 or 5 minute scoring droughts. We cannot do that against the Sacramento Kings, and we can't turn the ball over either. If we can take care of those things, we can definitely be in this game, and we'll see. They allow their opponents as well the 9th least rebounds per game. So the Bulls got to fight hard, and I don't know if we're going to see that double big lineup to start the game or a lot tonight, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see it somewhat tonight, especially if we need some key rebounds. They also force 13 turnovers per game to the Sacramento Kings, which is solid enough. So the Bulls have to take care of the basketball. So let's hope that the Bulls can take care of business tonight against the Kings. It should be a fun, entertaining game. It's a late start time again for the Chicago Bulls, so make sure you guys stay tuned in. I know I didn't have a post-game show after the Bucks game. I'm not even going to lie to y'all. I was tired. I think it was the exhaustion as well of hitting episode 1000 in that day and everything that kind of culminated in that day. But we'll be live tonight for the pregame, halftime, and postgame shows, all live on the channel tonight, so make sure you guys stay tuned in for that. Now, with that said, we do have a voicemail that we're going to get into, but before we get into that, we do have a message from our sponsor, Aura. I'm sure most of you know anyone can find anything on the internet, including your full legal name and personal email, your home address, phone number, and even your relatives. For me, personally, I never took this kind of stuff seriously, that people can take my personal data and use it for their own financial gain. Well, in 2019, I got my identity stolen, including my social security number and credit card information, and it was a total nightmare getting it all sorted out. From recouping loans that were taken out in my name and shopping sprees on my credit card, there are some really bad people out there, and it's sad to say, but it's true. Do a Google search for your personal information or someone you know and see if a people search site shows up. The information is easily accessible because of data brokers who profit by selling your information to robocallers, telemarketers, spammers, and anyone else that wants to learn more about you. And so for me, protecting my and my family's personal data and information is at the utmost importance because of the terrible experience I had 4 years ago. That's why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, Aura. Aura will identify data brokers that are exposing your information and automatically submit opt-out requests on your behalf. They will even opt out of junk mail and telemarketing lists. Aura also monitors your emails and passwords to see if they were involved in any data breach and exposed on the dark web. Aura's app also features VPN password manager, real-time credit card and identity theft monitoring, internet parental controls, and protects your device from malware. Aura has almost every internet safety tool you'll ever need, all inside one app, which is what makes it so amazing, so that you don't have to use multiple platforms and sites to protect yourself. Let Aura do the hard work, keeping you safe online, And if you sign up right now, Aura will give you a 2-week free trial with my link below. You'll be shocked at how much your private information Aura finds exposed over 2 weeks. I was shocked at how much my information Aura was able to find when I was using the app. Go to aura.com/CBC to start your free trial. Also linked in the description, or you can scan the QR code here. Now back to the video. All right. So with that said, let's go ahead and get to this voicemail for today. This one's from Shay.
What's up, Haize? This is Shay. You know, I tried to leave this voicemail earlier, but something went wrong with my phone, so I had to cut it off and cut it back on. Hey, I was thinking, we was wondering about Zach LaVine's trade, that I think this offseason would be a perfect time to trade him. Look, I feel as if a lot of teams, such as the Philadelphia 76ers, a lot of teams that want to take the next step, but really couldn't this year. And a lot of teams that are really suffering through injuries right now, and I'm slowly moving down in the standings, because a lot of teams do have injuries to their key guys, and they're falling down the fence. Some went to number one, now they're at number two. A lot of them are going to be making some moves to look for a scorer, such as the Lakers. So I think this offseason would be the perfect time to move on from Zach LaVine's contract via a trade. Now, look, I know you're going to say a lot of teams, his value has went down, but I feel like teams such as the Lakers, such as maybe the Utah Jazz, and not to mention Philly, and like it or not, I hate to say it, even though they made a lot of trades, the New York Knicks, because who knows, a lot of the trade pieces, such as our OG Anunoby, might not be there next year. And let's face it, Julius Randle is not reliable to stay healthy. I mean, not as Zach, but Zach LaVine gets his points a little bit easier than Julius Randle. So Jalen Brunson's going to be looking for another backcourt teammate. And all in all, I'm just saying that this offseason, it's either now or never when it comes to the Zach LaVine trade. Anyway, Tim, what you think? Peace.
All right, Shay, what a good point here. Here's what I'll say. Is there a possibility that teams look to pivot to Zach LaVine this offseason, like a team that kind of maybe they fizzle out in the second round of the playoffs, and then they want to add a scoring punch, or they look at it and say they need that? That's a possibility. I think the thing that's going to be the biggest hurting Zach is the questions around his health, right? And there are going to be some players that also are available that other teams could trade for that they may look to prioritize over Zach LaVine. We've heard that like in this past trade deadline. A lot of the teams that were rumored interested in Zach pivoted to or kind of prioritize more two-way players like DeJounte Murray, OG Anunoby, right, in their target list. So I do think that there could be a team that I'm still leaning more towards the Bulls are probably going to retain Zach LaVine at least until next year's trade deadline, because I think those questions around his health, the questions around how he impacts winning are still going to be there. But there is that possibility that you laid out the best scenario. A team that either in the second round or maybe the conference finals or maybe even the finals looks at it and says, hey, we need an extra score and we can use a 20-point per game score, and we feel like we have the framework to kind of, to that Zach LaVine can slide in here and we can overcome maybe his defensive liabilities, or like I think that Zach LaVine as a number 2 is going to really shock a lot of people. So if you have that surefire number 1, or even hell, if you can add Zach LaVine and he's your number 3, I think there are going to be a lot of teams that could look towards Zach and being that and think that he's going to fill that role nicely. I just have my doubts over with the injuries and things like that if it happens this offseason. But hey, I'm not saying that it can't happen outside the realm of possibility, and remains to see how motivated the Chicago Bulls are going to be to move Zach LaVine this offseason. Are they willing to kind of roll it back with Zach and, hope that he plays better and contributes to winning and things like that? Or do they want to avoid the kind of headache around the trade speculation and talk that really plagued the beginning of the season for the Chicago Bulls this year? Do they look to move away from that and go ahead and move him this offseason, even if it means taking a deal maybe that they didn't want, right? And that's the kind of the question in this as well, is that what are teams offering then for Zach LaVine that's coming off surgery, when there are already questions or us hearing that the Bulls didn't necessarily get the offers back that they would have wanted. And I don't think they're going to be willing to take just any deal for Zach. But hey, I could be wrong on that. But great voicemail there from Shay. But that's my time for today, guys. We'll be back tonight, so make sure you guys stay tuned in. Make sure you're following the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. And lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail, for the mailbag. The number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.